as soon as you can in age, try to get your kids involved with your business or your profession as much as possible so they can start learning. Kids can be smarter than you give them credit for. And I just remember my time growing up, just driving around with my dad and just we'd be talking about real estate and like pointing out different things. I remember he tells me the story as a kid. I was like 10, 12 years old, and we got the one intersection, and there's three gas stations all around. I'm like, why are there three here? Like, this the people going this way can hit that one and that one. They call it, and like, lo and behold, a couple years later, one of them goes bankrupt and out. And my dad loved to tell that story. I was even just looking around as a kid and understanding kind of supply and demand of real estate.
James Bohan, how are you today, sir?
I'm great, Kenny. Thanks for having me on your show.
We have a for sure expert in the building on all things tax related, specifically, I would say in the real estate sector as well. Those overlapping.
Yeah, my main business is primarily being a CPA and outsourced CFO for real estate investors and private equity fund managers. I got into this space about 13, 14 years ago. I've had my CPA license since 2011. And I started my career at the firm called Rothstein Cass, which was a specialist in the alternative investment space. And what we meant by alts back then was your hedge, your private equity, your real estate funds, stuff that wasn't traditionally stocks and bonds, got categorized in this idea of alts. So I grew up in a real estate family. I always learned about real estate at the dinner table. But when I started my professional career, I understood how fund managers and private equity was using the real estate asset class and layering these fund models around it. And so my career was really started going in and doing the taxes and structuring for a lot of these private equity real estate funds. I learned this other side of the business that I didn't get just growing up in a family of real estate developers.
That's awesome. So you just talking about the dinner table there. What was it about real estate that your family was doing? Is your dad buying real estate as well, or was it just a investing type of family dinner?
They were developing a lot. We moved out to Las Vegas in the 90s because my dad was developing some single family homes out there, which eventually rolled into developing some multifamily buildings. I remember having some conversations with my dad, and we just look at real estate as having a leveraged bet on inflation and a bet on the Federal Reserve doing what the Federal Reserve does. There's a lot of wisdom out there that says don't fight the Fed. And I feel like real estate is one of the main beneficiaries of Federal Reserve policy, where they continue to inflate the money supply and as a result, hard assets that you can't print more of just have their price load up in relation to the way that the monetary economy works.
Yeah, wow. So you and dad, now, was there a lot of other brothers and sisters in your family where this was just like a spirited conversation, like ongoing all the time, or was it like a you and dad thing?
It was more of a me and dad thing. I have a younger brother who wasn't really as interested in the family business. We've had talks, and over the years, they get to some level of wealth. And I asked my dad, like, why are you working so hard? What are you doing this for? And I said initially it was for survival. After he graduated college, he was working two or three jobs, living out of his car, washing dishes. And so a lot of his ethos came from this survivor mentorship. And then after that, he's saying he's working so hard to pass it along to my brother and I, so we don't have to go through some of the same strife that he did.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's a great way to build that foundation of values in regards to, listen, I'm not just trying to get a super nice car in the driveway here. We're trying to survive.
Yeah.
If you can take that same mentality and put it toward building real estate or development or building a team, I feel like there's just no ceiling on how far you can go. Tell me a little more about your dad, just this being the invested fathers. I always feel like that's a great insight into who you are, James. Is dad was like this, so this is how I turned out because of that, or I went another direction because things were like this.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I followed both my dad and my mom's careers pretty lockstep in a couple different ways, which is really funny. So my dad went to USC and ended up working for one of his professors in real estate. And my mom was a CPA. So I became a CPA. And then when I got my master's in real estate in development from USC, and then ended up working for one of my professors as the CFO. So it's crazy and weird to me how I've both dual tracked both of my parents' careers into one career for myself. It's pretty wild. And some of the best advice I got from my dad growing up was to get your CPA license, and then you'll be able to write your ticket to do anything you want in life.
Mm.
I never really quite understood what that was. You're a young 20-year-old kid graduating from college. You're like, I don't want to do accounting. It's hard work, it's hard hours, it's unappreciated, it's low pay compared to tech or finance. but it was such a good basis and foundation for being in business that I am starting to encourage other people now that, hey, if you want to be successful in life, or if you want to have a career in business, I highly recommend being an accountant, getting your CPA, because it's really hard to mess it up once you have that. And thinking about where career paths can go with a CPA and accountant, you can pick whatever industry or field that's really interesting to you. So for me, it was real estate, and I was able to work my way up, have all real estate clients, learn the business inside and out from my clients. I had the benefit and blessing of learning it from my family as well. But
Mhm.
for those that don't, you're able to get a very similar experience to I had growing up by being a CPA and accountant for businesses that you would eventually want to own or work in yourself. So a typical accounting career is you could work 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years, get yourself up to a manager level. Then you're really interacting with your clients on a very personal and in-depth basis. So when they might have a hiring need for their own internal CFO or accounting manager, the CPA that's working in public accounting for them is probably the number one fit for that job. So
Mhm.
it's just a matter of determination and being willing to suffer through accounting classes and getting that CPA exam passed and getting and then working for 2 years to get your license. If
Mhm.
you suffer enough doing this, then you're going to have an easier life on the back end. And being where I'm at now and providing for my wife and our eventual family and kids, having the CPA license is literally like gold because I know I will always be able to provide for my family one way or another.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned before we recorded, one of the main reasons why I focus on real estate is because I kept seeing people do it wrong. And it got me frustrated to the point of I just need to like rather do this, be the leader to maybe invest. Maybe the question is, what are some common mistakes or some mistakes that you've seen on your end? And because of seeing those done, whether how the operator structured something, what have you done because of it?
One thing I see that people invest in real estate do wrong is that they're just baking, praying, and hoping on rent growth to meet their pro forma. I would consider that speculation. A lot of time when I'm investing in real estate, I want to make sure there's forced equity in the project from the jump. If it's only an 80% occupancy building and I know I can go in with proper property management measures, I can jump it to 90, 95%. That's a solid NOI growth and that's solid value being delivered and forced equity from the jump. If you just buy something and hold it and hope for 5 to 10 years now it'll be worth more, that's speculation in my mind. So I think looking at projects and making sure, hey, where is the value I can add to this is something paramount when you're looking to make money in real estate. The other thing I see, and this is a study done on hedge funds, and so I'm not sure how applicable it is to real estate, but I'm sure there are some overlaps. It was a study that 50% of hedge fund managers didn't fail because they made bad investments. They failed because they had a bad back office. And what that means to me is, do they have an investor portal? Do they have an outside CPA? Is that CPA competent? Do they know about real estate? Do they have the proper attorney counsel? What's the internal controls like? Is the contractor or the controller stealing money? A very easy tip is the person who's cutting the checks shouldn't be the person who's accounting for the checks. And so just having some of these basic internal controls is important. And it's like an afterthought to a lot of fund managers. But I think as people should have a very disciplined approach to managing other people's money, I think this idea of having a fully established back office, whether in-house or outsourced, is important. And it shows investors that they're treating their capital investment properly and it's being looked after.
Awesome. Yeah, I get asked a lot. So if you're talking to a new investor, I would say one of the most common things they say is, I don't even know what to ask. What should my due diligence be? Like, how would you direct me to say this is a good deal? I mean, I like you, Kenny. I think I trust you with $100,000, but can you help give me some things that I can vet? So it seems like you have lived that in regards to, hey, we're looking at the underwriting, but also let's look at the staffing, that's the process, the attorneys, all those things that just can mitigate some of these potential pitfalls. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I do with my CPA practice. I've invested with some of my clients before, and their attitude towards the back office is definitely one of the considerations I have if I'm going to be placing money with one of them.
Yeah, that was my next question was how do you choose who to invest with? You've sat on the peek behind the curtain with some of these operators to see, hey, what exactly are we doing here? And maybe have seen a lot. Are there certain, I'm sure there's a lot of things, but what are some of the highlights on what you look for to who to invest with?
I think track record is important. I think their attention to detail, how much they care about their back office, their reporting to investors.
Mhm.
And then is it the person really doing it for fees? Is their long-term vision aligned with mine? Those are some of the questions I ask.
Cool. And your own investing career, because you have your own apartments and things as well. Is that something that you're right now focusing toward in on like bringing other investors with you, like other fund of funds managers or private capital?
Yeah, so I'm in the process of putting together a small fund right now to capitalize on some of the opportunities I'm seeing in the mountain states,
Hmm.
which are the fastest growing economies in the United States. We've just been doing it with our own family so far, but as we've built out the track record here, we're starting to get our fund documents together with the attorneys to start being ready to capitalize on what I see is coming around the bend here.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit of the conversation. Tell us a little bit about your fatherhood experience or lack of fatherhood thereof.
So I just got married about a year ago. My wife and I are practicing Christians, and we're waiting for the Lord to bless us with our first child. Hopefully, it'll happen in the next year. Right now, we're just trying to make sure we're getting all our lives aligned and ready to be able to welcome a child into the world. I've been working really hard on getting my accounting firm staffed up appropriately where I'm not working 16, 18 hours a day. So when we do have a family, I'll be able to be more present for them.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning. I feel that Christians in the workplace have a certain stigma, to be honest. I've lived in a bubble, but I've been around a certain Christian college, Christian business environment, and it just felt like, hey, you can't be rich and a Christian. Like there's a conflict of interest there. And I know that's a myth. And I think that's just still something that maybe I'm in the minority in thinking that. But in your experience, being a Christian in a secular environment, how has your experience been in being a Christian? And also, have you had certain views given to you that you feel like you've been trying to break?
Yeah, very good question. So I'm a newer Christian in my faith. I was raised Catholic, but that didn't stick to me. And then I went and explored Buddhism and all that other stuff. But the
Hmm.
past 3, 4, 5 years have just been real evidence to me of the truth of the gospel. And so I think the idea that Christians can't be rich, I don't think that's biblical. I think there are rich Christians or rich biblical figures in the Bible, whether they were Christian or not, depending on when that chapter was written. God wants to bless us. And I think the ultimate way to look at it at the end of the day is that we're going to be custodians of this wealth. It's not ours. We don't get to take it with us. We just
Mhm.
get to manage it and be custodians and servants of that wealth while we're here on this earth. And so I think taking the perspective, it's not mine, it's God's, and I am the servant and custodian on behalf of this wealth that He has blessed me with. One helps keep you humble, and two reminds you that you can be rich. And does God want to make a non-Christian or a Christian rich? Is a person in this world going to have more power or more influence or be able to impact more people's lives, whether they're rich or poor? You know, you definitely can in both ways. Service can happen in a lot of different ways. But if you're rich and a Christian, you're able to push the envelope through financial means and donate or start charities or endeavors that can impact millions of people. I don't think there's anything wrong at all for Christians to be rich, especially when you adopt the mindset that it's all his to begin and end with.
Totally agree. Yeah, I like to think of it like your hands are open. So if God places things in your hands, great. Tighten them up and no, don't take it back. But it takes them away. It could be billions of dollars. It could be what you just need to have food for this week kind of deal. And I love that. And that's so encouraging to hear about the new Christian. You've went a couple different routes in regards to trying to figure out where is peace, where is it at in regards to my soul, and how should I be living. I would love to explore, if you don't mind, the relationships you've had before being a Christian and now after. What have you seen? How have some of those maybe relationships in the business world been affected through a big change of yourself?
I haven't really noticed any glaring changes, and it's really hard to answer that question because over the past 4 or 5 years, as I'm becoming Christian, there was the whole pandemic that happened, and I
Yeah.
moved out of California and moved to Idaho. So just like a complete change in total lifestyle. The Lord has blessed me with a small farm that I live on up here, And so it's just been a completely different life. And I haven't really noticed any difference in my business interactions. The one thing for me was that I used to be the CFO of a debt fund and we lent a lot of money out to real estate developers. And so I had to do some more understanding and reading to see if money lending was an acceptable practice under Christianity, because I
Hmm.
had gotten some different understandings or feedbacks, but talking with my pastor helped me understand that in the business context, so long as it's not usury, their interpretation and mine as well as that lending is not haram and is allowed under the Christian faith.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the things that I hear, sort of a buzz thing is, the Bible would say, be in debt to no man. And I feel like you could take that and be like, is a mortgage a debt? Am I doing something? Do I have to buy a house in cash to like abide by that verse? From your profession and being a new Christian, has that been something you've journeyed down yet?
I'm going to take the same stance as you. I'm not an expert. I'm willing to have a conversation on it. And so
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's like a spectrum. If you get into a bunch of credit card debt to live outside your means, then you're
Hmm.
going to be stressing out, you're going to be unhappy, and God doesn't want that for you.
Right.
Whereas if you take on zero debt and you're Dave Ramsey
Right.
and you tell him, Dave Ramsey, if I lend you $1 billion at 1%, will you take it? He's no, I won't take it because I don't take debt. Dave Ramsey, I can take that $1 billion and put it in T-bills at 3%, and I'm getting 2% spread on $1 billion. But
Right.
no, I won't do it.
Right.
I think there's extremes there. I
Yeah.
think the idea with a home and just honestly, the root of the word mortgage is a little concerning. It's a Latin word, mort, death, gauge, grip. You literally have a death grip over you to pay for your housing. I think if you can own your home free and clear, that's obviously a great endeavor. It's not achievable or feasible for everyone. I have a mortgage on my
Hmm.
house as well.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
think just being prudent and proper with it, when you go into debt to live outside of your means, I think that's when you start to challenge God and say, hey, I need and want all this, but I haven't earned it yet. And so you borrow against credit, which I don't think is in line with what the Bible is trying to get at and dictate how
Hmm.
you should live your life in a way that's in harmony with God.
Thank you, James. You've been married for a year, 13 months, actually, you mentioned before. And there's that idea of legacy and values. And you mentioned already like working 16, 18 hours a day might have been the norm for a while. I've heard you on one of the coaching calls and you were spitballing so many things that I just did not understand, not because you weren't saying it, but it's because I felt like you were very knowledgeable on structuring these different things in the business world. So all to say is you've qualified yourself very much in your business role. As you take maybe some shifts in priorities as family starts to grow, obviously you're wanting to spend time with your wife. What are some things that are really important to you that the older James, who had all the time in the world to work on the business, would shift now?
I've actually been able to focus and work more. My wife and I have adopted and come to the same conclusion, or we want to be on the same page of having a traditional marriage where we like to say she's the domestic engineer and I'm the provider. I get the house, she makes the home.
Mm-hmm.
Simple things like that that I think have been lost in this secular society. So honestly, over the past year, I've been able to just focus and lock in on work a little bit more, knowing that she's gotten the house on lock.
Hmm. Excellent. So now that you guys have found each other, the different roles that you would say you can now focus more on the job versus before you might have been like keeping up with the house more or doing things that you were doing two roles. Now you're like, hey, here's the roles. This is working really well for us. This is what I feel like it should be. And you've been able to be more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Like before, when I was a single man, you'd be wasting time chasing women. And now all that time I can spend on going on a date night with her once a week and then just pour the rest of that energy into being productive for her and me and the family.
Yeah. You touched a little bit on the idea of secular mindsets of roles and whatnot. One of the questions I ask on this podcast is what are some problems we see with that you see with other dads? Maybe not necessarily dads has to be the word there, but a fatherly role or like mentors. What are some things that you're like, man, if we could just get this in order, I really feel like the world would be a better place.
Yeah, really good question. I feel like if dads had more time to apprentice their children and be in their lives, I've really tried really hard to set up my life to just be different and really own my own time so I can be there for my family in the future. And I think that when men go outside the home for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, they're losing a lot of time where they can interact with and apprentice their children. And so I think as soon as you can at an early age, try to get your kids involved with your business or your profession as much as possible so they can start learning. Kids can be smarter than you give them credit for. And I just remember my time growing up, just driving around with my dad and just we'd be talking about real estate and like pointing out different things. I remember he tells me the story as a kid. I was like 10, 12 years old, and we got the one intersection, and there's three gas stations all around. I'm like, why are there three here? Like, this the people going this way can hit that one and that one. They call it, and like, lo and behold, a couple years later, one of them goes bankrupt and out. And my dad loved to tell that story. I was even just looking around as a kid and understanding kind of supply and demand of real estate.
No, I love that. I think that's really awesome advice. As dads, how can you bring in your kids into your work? Does it have to be this like completely separate? No, it's too hard to explain, or he'll just get in the way, or I don't know, whatever it is. Why not bring them in and have a little apprentice that you're going to be with for the next 100 years, however long you're alive here, and just get that relationship nurtured. Okay, from your firsthand experience, what's something that we could be doing today that would help us be a better, rather role model, mentor, or dad?
I'm gonna say follow Jesus's example as much as possible, and that is to bring in 100% truth and 100% grace into our interactions with everyone, especially our family.
Have you experienced, this is something that I'm sure husbands face all the time, but you have an argument or you do something that requires humility, asking forgiveness. Has there been something that you've seen God working in your life, or a huge victory on something where you were like, man, this was really hard to do. I did it. Some story of sort of like reconciliation, or some, hey, I messed up and this is what I did because of it, and I'm better because of it.
Give any specific examples right now, but I think
Okay.
it's just adopting the mindset that failures can lead to becoming better. When you come onto this planet, you're destined to fail, and it's how you get over those failures and build up towards a success is important. I think when you get into arguments with your spouse or your family, they can lead to help resolve issues that may have not been talked about and a way for you to address and fix problems so you can have a healthier family and marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Wrapping up, James, tell our audience, number one, what are the best ways to track what you're doing, ways they could follow you?
Thanks, Kenny. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there at James Bohan, CPA, MRED. Then also my website has a lot of information about what we're up to. That's www.stonehan.com. That's stone like a rock and Han like Han Solo.
Perfect. James, thanks for being with us today, buddy. We'll keep track of where you're going, and thanks for all your time.
Thanks, Kenny.